Alright, Outer Sex fam, we're back today. It's a Sunday, and I figured I'd cut a little video because we've had a lot of questions in the past. And it's a pretty good focal point of the business here is what's right behind me, which is the rim fence. I'll give you a little history on it, how it come to be. Basically, as we walk along it, you can see that it is, in this section, it is significantly taller than me. I think it's about 12 feet tall, something like that right here. Maybe 10. Let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rims high, and they're 15-inch rims. So, whatever the math works out on that. And basically, this is where the rim fence section started, is right here. It come about because my dad doesn't like to throw anything away, he loves to recycle, and we needed to fence the yard. We'd done some slat work up around at the start of the original building. Well, no, this wasn't the original building, but it started this building back in 1983. My dad didn't like it. It's not tough. It doesn't keep with what we got. And basically, you know, it was expensive. I mean, not expensive, but like compared to like regular fencing, but you know, pricey when you're talking. The original yard was about 5 acres. And so basically the one thing we had an abundance of around here was wheels and tires. Back in them days, you couldn't crush a car with wheels and tires. You couldn't send tires to the mill. And so wheels all got removed and had to be de-rimmed before you even threw them back in the car. And so basically we had an abundance of wheels and tires. Or rims and tires, I guess, make wheels. Whatever the PC way of doing it is, or the YouTube way of saying it. And so basically the whole back of the 5 acres was a pile of tires that was probably, as a kid I remember it, being around 6 foot tall and probably 10 or 12 feet wide, the whole length of the back of the 5 acres. And so when we crush cars and wheels and tires and all that stuff, it'd just go into that pile. It was just like a kind of a fence. It was just a big pile of wheels and rims and tires around the whole length of the back of the fence here. And so my dad got the idea that basically the best thing to do with them is to de-rim them, and then we could weld them together and build a big wall out of them. And so my cousin got tasked with this when he was younger, and he come to live with us, and that was his job every day. He would take an old Ford flatbed we had and go and pick up a load of tires, or wheels and tires, or rims and tires, make wheels or whatever, out of the big pile down the back fence, back property line. And he'd bring them up to the tire room, and he'd de-rim them until he had a giant pile of wheels and rims. And from there he would sort them into 13-inch, 14-inch, 15-inch, that sort of deal, because they are all the same size, because they make different size sections, and we don't want different size sections. So once he got a giant pile of each one of them, we had a flatbed, and he would weld them together into sections. And I think the sections were probably like 8 high and probably 6 wide or something like that. We can look at some that are on the ground still and show you what they look like. But once we had enough sections, we would put posts in the ground, cement them in the ground, and then take the big, we called it the Cornhusker, it was a big international 4-door 6-wheel truck with a high boom on it, and we would set them in place and then weld them to the posts and then weld them together. And that's what built the rim fence. And so as we go around it, you can see exactly how big and how many wheels is in the rim fence. This is just a section on the front of the property here. We'll go down to the end here and look down the other corner of the property, and I can show you how many's down there, and then we'll drive around it just to get a feel for it. So this is a section that runs down the west end of our yard, and it does have a bit of a lean to it, especially down there, and we're gonna have to do something about that. But for right now, the bank's kind of giving away just a little bit down there on the end. But yeah, it is, these are 15-inch wheels on this section, and these are 14-inch. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8 high. And that's the difference in the height between 14-inch wheels and 15-inch wheels, even though there's the same number of wheels. And if you look at it, you'll find some rare wheels, which weren't rare at the time, and some kind of interesting ones. A lot of them are just run-of-the-mill steel wheels. But if you look, there is some Mopar Rally wheels, there's some Magnum 500 wheels in there. It's kind of fun to go through them and try and pick out which ones you can recognize. But these were some of the first sections that were built, and if you noticed, they are facing two different directions, which kind of drives me crazy. I don't know why my dad did it that way or allowed him to do it that way or whatever, but there are, like, this is the face of the wheel, and then back over here is the back side of the wheel. So I don't know, it screws with my OCD a little bit looking at it, but whatever. And then there is like a random wheel here that is backwards in the way of putting it, but I guess it really doesn't matter. From a distance it looks good. You can tell, like right here, this was the joining of two sections, and these are jacks, like stick jacks that were in trunks of cars, and they were cut up to build spacers to join sections or mismatch stuff. And so it was all built out of scraps and stuff we didn't use or need. So we'll go around here and we will see how big or how many wheels are in the rim fence. While we are here, it is worth noting about the grader that sits over my shoulder right here. It was owned by Mike Fulmer and Fulmer Construction or Fulmer Trucking, and they did do dirt work. And this grader right here was responsible for this has touched every square foot of what is fenced out here. This old grader, this old cat, has flattened every piece of this yard out here. After Mike passed away, the grader hadn't been ran in a long time. And so Aaron brought it out here, and I got a friend that has another grader similar to it, and I think when he gets back to town, he's gonna probably end up with this grader as well. But it's worth noting that it is a piece of history for the auto recyclers. It wasn't Aaron's lot in town, but he brought it out here to the yard. It did run. I think the motor's locked up in it now, probably from sitting, but ours was too back in the day. So it is savable, and it's an old cat grader. It's a all mechanical grader. Really awesome setup, neat old grader. But yeah, this grader is the one that flattened out the whole yard. This fence has been put up since probably 1986, 87, somewhere in there. They'd have to correct me on it to be sure. Mark would be the one that would remember. I was a kid. I was probably 6 years old when they were putting this fence up somewhere in there. So as we get over here to the opposing corner of the yard, the original yard, the 5-acre yard, basically, you can see behind me that it goes on for quite a ways. There was a lot of wheels. So this whole section all the way through here, and then all this section down through this side, was all a pile of wheels and tires, or rims and tires making wheels, whatever it is. I'm gonna call them wheels. But there was just a giant pile that was like 6 feet tall and 10 feet, 12 feet wide, and the whole length down this way, and pretty much the whole length down this way. And that's where we ended up with all the rims to do the rim fence. My dad doesn't like to waste anything. He doesn't like to throw stuff away. He likes to build stuff out of old stuff. And it worked out really good. I mean, it's a really solid fence. It is fairly easy to climb, but we keep a pretty close eye on it. It wasn't a big deal, and it worked out really well. Eventually, at one point we were going to put barbed wire on top of it, but there's really no point. Like, you can't really pack much over it, and even if you do, it's pretty easy to see down our fence lines. We have everything camera monitored now, so it's not the end of the world either. But basically, that's how that worked out. And we got all this sections of rim fence put in, and it actually runs right down there to just by the crusher, or just past the crusher, the prep area, to where the drain rack is. And that's where the rim fence stops. And then that's where the story gets more interesting. We were going to go all the way down, and then we were going to, once we bought this piece of property, we were going to take it and do rim fence there. And as you can see behind me, we have more sections of rim fence. And so I'll step back a second, or turn back a second, and I'll show you what a rim section looks like. So this is a section of rim fence. And it's like this is like, looks like 13-inch wheels. 6, 7, 8, 9. These are 10 wide by 7 tall. 6 tall by 10. And so you could either stand them vertically or you could do them horizontally depending on the height of the fence that you wanted. And we have more sections all the way down the line here. We have enough sections to do this whole back fence here. We had them all built up and everything was ready. But in the process of this, Sweetwater County, many years ago, back in the 80s when we were doing this, they come to us and said they hated it. They didn't want it. They thought it was ugly. They want us to take it down. And my dad says, well, you know, it's a fence. It's a good fence. It looks uniform. It's strong. You know, the wind doesn't have an effect on it. You know, it's stout. It's a byproduct of what we have here. And, you know, what's the harm in it? You know, the wind blows through it. It actually kind of disperses the wind and blocks the wind on the inside, which is really nice. But, you know, what's the harm in making a fence out of wheels or rims? And the county had a fit. They sent us letters saying they wanted us to paint it an opaque color because they didn't like the rust. They wanted it to, want us to tear it down. They wanted a whole bunch of different stuff, and they kept trying to have us do stuff. And it wasn't against any county ordinances at the time. And, you know, we basically just said, you know, we like it. And people liked it. I mean, we've been in tons of magazines for it and pictures and newspapers all over the country. We were a stop-in point or a check-in point for people traveling either down the Lincoln Highway, which is, you know, just behind us, the original Lincoln Highway, or, you know, people traveling the interstate or the Pony Express route, which is just on the other side of the tracks right over here. And so, you know, it was a point everybody get their picture taken, and it was just a novelty, and it was nothing we designed to be a novelty, but it was just, you know, something people liked. And so basically the county couldn't make us take it down, but they did pass an ordinance that said you cannot use recycled car parts for fencing. And so that was on the books in Sweetwater County until 2012. In 2012, they repealed it because there is, you know, tires that are converted into fencing and ground up rubber and other fencing materials that are that way as recycled auto parts or car parts that are now used for fencing. And so when they repealed that, it will allow us to continue with our fence. We've had this stuff stacked out for 30 years. And in hopes that we could, you know, be able to use it someday, which, you know, we've done it temporarily. We put some leg stands on it, and we'll use it as temporary screening, I guess, instead of fencing. And so that's kind of the point with the way we had the buses and the stuff behind me here, is we have the posts and the buses have made a wall, but the posts are in all the way down the line pretty much. And, you know, they're ready for the fence sections, and we have the fence sections here. And so after 2012, where we were allowed to use this for fencing again. You know, the county, I don't know why they had a problem with it years ago, but there was a different time and different mentality as well. You know, nowadays this is amusing and a novelty, and people like it. People liked it back then too, but, you know, it's, I guess, more acceptable than, you know, a random rim fence. The other question we get a whole bunch is how many wheels are there, or how many rims are in the rim fence? I have no idea. As a kid growing up, I've got that question a lot. Still to this day, we get that question a lot. I've had my daughter try and count it. Everybody kind of gets bored by the time they try and reach, you know, all the way around of the main yard here, you know, which is our original yard, before they can actually get an accurate number on the fence, on the rims in the fence. We had a customer give Callie, I think, I don't know, it was like 20 bucks or 50 bucks or 100 bucks, or he paid her to try and get him an answer. And I think she had an answer. I don't know how accurate it really was, but I would guess it was probably fairly accurate. But there's a lot. I mean, it goes around, I would say a solid 3 sides of 5 acres. You could probably calculate it, but between the 14 and 15-inch wheels and different stuff like that, it's hard to be 100% accurate. You can get yourself in the ballpark, but I would say, needless to say, there's thousands of them. And my cousin built them all. But that brings us over to the truck that we used to set the sections. the rim fence sections. And so behind me is this International, and it's an old Lodestar. It's got a crew cab. It has a 392 engine with an Allison automatic in it. It does have air brakes, and it is four-wheel drive or 6x4, and so the front axle is not live, but the two rear axles are. This is the old International, and this actually come out of Kennecott Copper Mine, and it had 5,000 miles on it, but it was 5,000 of the roughest miles you ever saw. So my dad went through the suspension and chassis, front and all the axles. They did some body work to it back like 35 years ago, 40 years ago. It never really did get painted or anything. I built a big old front bumper for it. It does drive. It still does run. I got it running. I did drive it to where it sits here. But it's had a rough life. It's really neat though. And the boom does work. It's still got a high boom on it. The back of the cab is beat up from people not running it very well. And it's set up to have a set of torches mounted in the back seat. And then in the front, it's just an old Lodestar, gas motor. Got some steps that my dad fabbed up for it. It's got a military bed on it. And we used to go through the yard, we'd pull motors and set them in the bed and that sort of deal when it would drive around. I would like to do something with it someday. It does run and drive. I did make sure of that. The motor was stuck from it sitting before we took back over the yard. So I did spend some time and get it running and driving. Fuel pump's kind of not that great in it. But other than that, I mean, the motor doesn't have much oil pressure, but it still runs and drives well. I mean, I wouldn't take it down the interstate or nothing, but you know, it's amusing and it's a piece of history from out here. So yeah, eventually we want to go through the front of the yard, right around the main building, and put fence sections there, just because that will tie in our rim fence sections a little better instead of the wood sections that were there too. But that's in the future. It's kind of a neat piece of our history. There's a lot of wheels or rims in the rim fence. It's just kind of something fun, and if you stop by, get a picture with it or whatever you want to do. I can't think of any other ones, but we've been in I don't know how many magazines and newspapers and everything because of it, and it's just something weird, and it's just something my dad come up with and decided that's what a good use would be, and we needed fencing, and that's kind of where it came from. It was fun to see what the county had responded about it, and eventually, you know, it is off the books, so we're going to continue with the rim fence in the future. Well, fam, that's about it for this video on the Auto Recycler's rim fence and the history of it. We'll come back with the next video and see what's on the agenda for something else we want to talk about. So until the next video, thanks for watching.